Welcome to the GoVols247 Podcast. It is Thursday of Arkansas week. Tennessee is set to be back at home and back in action at Neyland Stadium on Saturday afternoon, hosting the Razorbacks. I'm Patrick Brown. I'll be hosting this episode. I'll be joined by Ryan Callahan across town as we get you ready for the lone home game in about a 6-week span for the Vols, who are 4-1 coming out of September and about a 2-touchdown favorite in this game. And Ryan, we've got a lot to get to. We will get to some questions here later in the podcast. We will also preview this matchup. We will go over the availability report from the SEC that on Wednesday night revealed Tennessee's first injury update of the week. Some good news there. We will get all of that. We're just going to skip the pleasantries, Ryan. I assume you're doing good.
Yeah, all good.
I mean, no need to get into it. Hockey season has started, so I know you're fired up. The Cubs have not been eliminated, so I know you're not excited about that. And the Titans have won, so they're not going to go 0-17. So we know you're fine. I'm good. Yeah. It's fall break this week for everybody, so let's just get to it. And we will start with the availability report, which on Wednesday night revealed that David Hobbs is not on it. The defensive tackle that Josh Heupel said on Wednesday it was having a really good preseason camp before he went down with a foot injury. He is not listed, so he is on track to be back. Only 3 players ruled out: Jermon McCoy, Ricky Gibson, and Razorbacks Jackson. We talked about McCoy at length really on our Monday podcast, so check that out if you missed it, and we'll see what his timetable is. The other notable injury from the availability report was Ethan Davis is questionable. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury since the Georgia game. I believe the ABC sideline report on that game was that his shoulder was dislocated, so he is obviously still dealing with some lingering effects of that, which I can't imagine that's fun to play with at a physical position like tight end if your shoulder is messed up. So we'll see if there's any more changes Thursday and Friday night. But Ryan, what's your big takeaway from the first injury report of the week for Tennessee?
Yeah, I guess not a surprise, but just, to potentially have David Hobbs back for this game. We've talked about it before. It's a big deal. And that's something that really could make a difference for this defense. I don't know that all of Tennessee's problems have been related to injuries. It seems like they've had just a few issues slowing things down in general, more so than they did last year when they had a really good defense that ranked top 10 nationally in a few categories. So it just may not be that type of defense again. But on the other hand, we don't really know for sure because they were missing Jackson Moy almost from the start, and they were missing David Hobbs from the start. So this will be potentially the first time Tennessee's had all those guys out on the field at the same time this season. And perhaps that gives Tennessee's defense a shot in the arm, but it's definitely at least a welcome return and an influx of talent and experience there in the interior of the defensive line that that Tennessee's been waiting for. And this is one of the reasons, Patrick, that I said going into the season, to me, it was all about survive those first 5 games of the season. Maybe you get Jermon McCoy back. David Hobbs was expected to be back around this time, and looks like he will be. And obviously we didn't know at the time that Ricky Gibson was going to get hurt. We didn't know that David Sanders was going to have issues getting on the field, but for the most part, that's still in play. We're still kind of waiting to see what Jermon McCoy is going to be going to look, his availability is going to look like going forward. But regardless, potentially getting David Hobbs back is a big deal, especially when most of Tennessee, or at least the most glaring issues I would say Tennessee's had defensively have been to me the fact that they've struggled in stopping the run and not been able to get, contain runs getting to the outside. They've been pretty good at that in the past. So that's been a little bit surprising to me that they've struggled in that area, and maybe the return of a guy like Hobbs can make a difference there. So that's the main thing that obviously stands out. And then, just not having many names on it, which coming off the open date, not a huge surprise, but looks like it's a mostly healthy team, a few noteworthy exceptions to that, but they were pretty banged up, after playing 5 consecutive games. It looks like the open date has at least helped in that regard in terms of Tennessee getting some guys back this week.
Yeah, no Marion Dye, no Dwan Morris, who were both out for the Mississippi State game. Razorbacks Jackson, as we've kind of touched on, was going to miss a few weeks with the after taking the hard hit on his shoulder against Georgia. Obviously, Ricky Gibson is out for an extended period of time, and we're still in wait and see mode on Jermon McCoy. But getting Hobbs back, I agree. I'll be interested to see, because Jackson Moy had an arm injury, right? He misses 3 games and was close to coming back against Georgia, right? I mean, they had him questionable on the first 2 reports that week. He was downgraded to doubtful. He wasn't ruled out until the pregame report, and he was dealing with an arm injury. So when he comes back against Mississippi State, he plays 44 snaps. Obviously, he was able to continue his conditioning. I think the same probably applies to David Sanders. He only played 11 or 12 snaps against Mississippi State, but there was no concern necessarily of how many snaps can he go, just because he's not been in the full swing of things. I'll be interested to see if that's the case with Hobbs, who has been dealing with a foot injury. He was in a boot using crutches to get around early on after his injury. Hasn't been dealing with those for a few weeks now, but I'll be interested to see conditioning wise, are they going to get that many snaps out of him? Do they need that many snaps out of him? Having him back gets that rotation a little bit more, kind of like what they would probably like it, where maybe you don't need to play Bryson Eason 60 snaps, don't need to play Dominic Bailey 60 something snaps. Again, those guys will still probably play quite a bit, but having Hobbs back kind of gets that whole defensive line rotation a little bit back in order. I think we'll still see Nathan Robinson. I'll be interested to see if Isaiah Campbell will get a handful of snaps, because I think he was kind of coming on there from the UAB and Mississippi State games and played, I think, close to 20 snaps against Mississippi State, even with Moy back. So, and then it also gets your defensive end situation back to where you want it with Tyree West, Tyree Weathersby, and Bailey, and obviously the Leo spot. They've got those three guys there. So just about back to where they need to be. And we'll see again if Tennessee makes any additions Thursday and Friday night. Remember, they did that before the Mississippi State game. Morris and Dye were a couple guys that got added. I think Ethan Davis was too, that weren't on the report Wednesday and were on Thursday. So we'll see if there's any additions and if anything changes with anybody here over the next couple games. And Ryan, as we shift to this game itself, doing some stuff with Trey Biddy from our Arkansas site, Hogs 24/7 this week. They're kind of interested to see what it's going to look like, and I think that's the biggest question mark for me in this game is, what is Arkansas? What kind of team? Which version of Arkansas is Tennessee going to get in this game? Because Arkansas has shown that it's good enough to push Ole Miss to the wire, lead Memphis by multiple scores in that game, but also bad enough to lose those games at the end, and then obviously get beat as bad as they did against Notre Dame. So big issues on defense. I think they're the SEC's worst defense statistically. Offensively, though, they are putting up numbers. Taylen Green would scare a lot of people, a lot of defenses, a lot of defensive coordinators. But you look at some of the games that they've had, they only scored 13 against Notre Dame. I think they only scored 7 points against Ole Miss in the second half, only 3 points in the second half against Memphis. So an offense that runs hot and cold, you're going to get a lot of different things from Bobby Petrino. So what is the upset alert factor? What's the concern factor for Tennessee going into this game, not knowing, A, what kind of Arkansas you're going to get, and B, what even to maybe expect from Arkansas because of the staff changes as they shift from Sam Pittman to the interim coach Bobby Petrino and some of the staff changes he's made on defense?
Yeah, I think in terms of the likelihood of an upset, it's pretty low, but I do think there's a chance Arkansas hangs around in this game for quite a while and at least make things somewhat interesting. So in that regard, you can't rule it out. It is an SEC game, and we've seen, well, home teams have fared well. That's one thing working in Tennessee's favor in this. Home teams have not been upset a whole lot this season, but we've seen some upsets. And just last week, Texas losing to Florida, and Vanderbilt played well against Alabama for a little while. You've seen some other upsets in previous weeks. There's just a lot of parity in this league, and there's not a single dominant team, I don't think, in this conference. So it looks like anybody within that top 10 or 12 is capable of beating almost anybody on any given day. The thing is, Arkansas is probably not in that top 10 or 12. So this is one of those games that, playing at home, you would think Tennessee is going to take care of business in this one. And also because they remember what happened last year, and that was coming off an open date too, going to Fayetteville and losing that game. The sort of weird thing about that game is Taylen Green, as good as he is, didn't really kill Tennessee in that game. Now, Tennessee had a really good defense last year, but it wasn't Green that cost them that game. It was, oddly enough, the backup quarterback, Malachi Singleton, that came in and led Arkansas to that go-ahead and what turned out to be game-winning score in the final minutes there. And Arkansas kind of ran the ball down Tennessee's throat when the game was on the line a little bit. It wasn't just gaudy numbers, but they were able to run it and convert some third downs and things like that. So there are some reasons to be cautious about this game and to know that Tennessee can't take anything for granted. But at the same time, this is a team that Notre Dame went on the road and beat 56-13, and that has some obvious issues defensively. Tennessee scored 40+ on everyone they've played so far. So even though they didn't have they're coming off what was really their worst offensive performance of the season against Mississippi State. Even in that one, they scored 41 with the help of overtime. So you would think they're going to put up some points against a team that ranks as low defensively as Arkansas does in so many categories. But at the same time, Arkansas is really good on third down. They've got a running quarterback that can always be a great equalizer in games like this. Taylen Green is one of, I think, 3 active FBS quarterbacks with 2,000+ career rushing yards. He's Arkansas's leading rusher. And they've got a couple pretty good backs, bigger backs, that kind of like what gave Tennessee trouble a little bit against Mississippi State. But yeah, Arkansas is 5th in the country, converting 57.9% of their third downs. So if Tennessee's defense struggles to get off the field, they could make this a lot more interesting than fans are expecting. They're about a 2-touchdown favorite, but in the SEC, you can't assume anything, and Tennessee's going to have to show up and play their best to make sure this is not a dogfight for 4 quarters, because I think Arkansas is capable of doing that. And give Trey Biddy credit for pointing this out too. Arkansas has played a lot of really tough road games, even when they have lost on the road in this conference, especially. They have lost by 7 or fewer points to just about everybody they've played when they've gone on the road. So they have a history of kind of being a thorn in the side for teams like Tennessee. So a couple reasons this game is one Tennessee can't overlook, but given everything that's on the line and what happened last year and the fact that it's at home, I do think the upset likelihood is pretty low for Tennessee in this game.
Yeah, with all the unknowns with Arkansas, I kind of, in sort of picking this game, I've kind of just leaned towards, okay, what do we know? We know that Tennessee's going to put up a lot of points. You kind of touched on this. They played, a C-plus game against Mississippi State, still scored 41 points. I know they had, obviously, an extra possession there in overtime, but still close to 470 yards. And, they left a lot of points on the field, as offensive coordinator Joey Halsey talked about on Tuesday. They dropped a touchdown pass. Had one called back on offensive pass interference. Had some drives stalled out. They had to settle for some field goals, 3 turnovers, and they still were able to put up that many points. And they're playing an Arkansas defense that's it's been really porous.
The one caveat to that, though, is, of course, Tennessee had 2 defensive touchdowns against Mississippi State. So, in the fourth quarter, until the final minutes, they had scored more points on defense than they had on offense. So that part was a little concerning. But yeah, overall, the fact they're still finding ways to score 40-plus points, that generally bodes well going into a matchup like this.
And looking at Arkansas staff changes, and we talked to Joey Halsey on Tuesday after our previous podcast. Bobby Petrino gets named the interim coach at Arkansas and immediately fires 3 of, I don't know how many assistants they have on defense, but just cleaned house on that side of the ball. Elevated Chris Wilson's going to be the interim defensive coordinator. He actually has a tie to Josh Heupel and Joey Halsey. He was at Oklahoma in the late 2000s when Heupel was an assistant there, and Halsey was finishing up his playing career and then starting his coaching career. He's been in college. He was Dan Mullen's defensive coordinator at Mississippi State in the early 2010s. And he came to Arkansas from the USFL. That's where he spent his last few years. They brought in Jay Hayes, who was a longtime NFL veteran assistant coach who was in that league too. So Tennessee has sort of been diving into some of those backgrounds to know what to expect and to prepare for anything and everything. That said, Tennessee, as we sort of touched on earlier this week, is expecting basically a similar defense that they saw last season. I think Arkansas still has the personnel to, they've got some bigger body defensive linemen to play a 3-down front, and they've still got enough safeties to roll out a 3-safety look, some 2-star looks that gave Tennessee some troubles last season. So Tennessee's going into this game expecting that. And Joey Halsey talked about how they just need to call plays that they know they can execute early, see what they're getting, and kind of adjust from there. But Tennessee is sort of expecting the defense that they got last year, even though that defensive coordinator is now unemployed after the staff changes. So communication will be important, but Tennessee just got to go out and execute what they do. I think they do need to get the run game going a little bit. It's not been bad, but it's not been super productive either. It's easier to stomach when you're throwing the ball for so much, for so many yards and making as many big plays. But Tennessee should, I think, be able to they should be able to score 40+ in this game comfortably, I would think. Question is, how many stops can they get? And this is a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup for the Arkansas defense, right? They've played some good offenses this season. Ole Miss, Memphis can put up numbers. Notre Dame, I think, is settled in with C.J. Carr at quarterback. And Tennessee is right along with that. Now they need to continue to clean up some things and to pick up where they left off. You hope that, Tennessee's open date doesn't get them sort of rusty a little bit, if you know what I mean. So, the way they were playing, you want that to continue even after an extra week off. But Ryan, defensively, I think Tennessee should be concerned, or should they not be concerned? What's the worry level against Taylen Green and some of the guys that they've got around him?
Well, yeah. So Arkansas does have the worst run defense in the league, and that's one of the things that as you alluded to is working in their favor. But with that being said, the numbers aren't as gaudy as you might think. Hearing that, I think they're allowing like 168 rushing yards a game. And that number's inflated a little bit by what Memphis did. They ran for 290 on 41 carries in that game, averaging 7 yards an attempt. But even Ole Miss didn't run the ball that well against Arkansas. They ran for 118 yards and averaged less than 3 yards a carry. So somewhat mixed results against this Arkansas defense. And then you throw in the staff changes there, and you kind of just don't know what to expect. I get the sense that we're probably going to see a pretty aggressive game plan from Arkansas on both sides of the ball. You're playing against an offense like Tennessee's where you just want to cause some chaos for an offense that's putting up those kinds of points and making big plays in the passing game. So they may blitz a lot. They may sell out to stop the run. Petrino mentioned in some of his comments this week that you worry a lot about stopping the run against a team like Tennessee because they are so explosive in the passing game that you can almost you can get beat by allowing them to run the ball consistently. So that'll be interesting to see kind of the chess match on that side of the ball and how much Arkansas is really capable of doing. But yeah, offensively is where Arkansas scares you the most. Just looking at their best path to upsetting Tennessee or at least making this an interesting game probably involves Arkansas putting up some points in this game and making it kind of a shootout. I don't know if they can stay stride for stride with Tennessee if they get into the 40s, but they're capable of putting up a good number of points. And Taylen Green's a really dynamic player. He's capable of beating you with his arm and with his legs. Again, Arkansas won that game last year despite not having great numbers from Taylen Green. Tennessee didn't give up a whole lot to him in that game. Did a nice job, but this is a defense that's struggling to begin with right now. They're not lighting it up this year so far. We'll see how much the return of David Hobbs helps in that regard. Maybe the open date, they looked at some things they can do differently, but too many runs getting bounced to the outside and resulting in productive plays and even in the passing game, giving up some things. Georgia obviously had some success going down the field against Tennessee. You don't have Jermod McCoy back, so Ty Redmond is out there still and has been getting picked on a little bit. He's not getting just completely destroyed, but he's given up some passes. So you've got some reason to worry a little bit about the secondary still. And then, you just not tackled very well in the run game, not doing a good job of kind of setting the edge and keeping things from bouncing outside. So, and even the pass rush, I think, has some room for improvement. They're second in the country, I think, in sacks right now, but it's been kind of from a variety of places. They've got really nice production from Josh Josephs and Caleb Herring, but most of those sacks have come from other players. So they're having to blitz. It's coming from other defensive linemen. So sometimes they are getting a good rush with 4, but sometimes they're not. So in a game like this, how does that translate against a quarterback that can make you pay if you give him time? Sometimes he can make you pay if you flush him out of the pocket. It's a tough matchup in that way. So, LaVorne Harbin, outside linebackers coach, compared Taylen Green to Michael Vick and Vince Young. Those are obviously pretty gaudy statistical standouts from their time in college football years ago. But they, just to evoke those names, that tells you what you're dealing with a guy like Taylen Green. So Tennessee's got to be ready for this challenge, and you certainly can't assume anything based on the interim coach situation and Arkansas's record, because again, they had Ole Miss, in a pretty tight game and had Ole Miss or had Memphis on the ropes, and that may be a playoff team by the end of the year. So this is a dangerous team. It's definitely a game you can't overlook, and Taylen Green's the number one reason for that. But a couple good running backs, bigger backs that Mike Washington and Braylon Russell, bigger guys that have had, Russell was pretty effective against Tennessee last year. So multiple reasons to worry about this matchup on both sides of the ball, but especially it's that offense and Taylen Green that I think causes you the most concern.
Yeah, Green, you mentioned or Chop mentioned the Vince Young, Mike Vick comparisons, and I saw some highlights of that 2002 Tennessee Arkansas 6 overtime game, and Matt Jones was Taylen Green with the long strides, and it just seems like they could never tackle him. I think I was at that game, and they had like a 90-yard touchdown late to tie it, send it to overtime. But Green's just that he's got that long stride that when he gets out in the open, I mean, it makes guys take bad angles, and they misjudge how fast he is. But it never looks like he's really sprinting. It looks like he's just sort of gliding because he's 6'6" and 230 pounds. You mentioned the two running backs. Mike Washington's close to 230. Is a transfer from New Mexico State. I don't think he played with Star Thomas because he was at Buffalo before that. And then Braylon Russell, as you mentioned, the sophomore that had some good runs against Tennessee last season. Arkansas is brought, loaded up at the skill positions in the portal as well. Omega Blake is their top receiver by a long shot. He's their most, their most targeted guy. He's a transfer from Charlotte that began his career at South Carolina. They have a tight end, Rohan Jones, who's got a Randy Moss like stat line, 6 catches for like 220 yards. So they've got some big play guys, and I think that's what makes this Arkansas offense hard to defend, is that, as you touched on, Ryan, they're second in the SEC, I think, in third down percentage, close to 60%. So they're hard to get off the field, but they're also generating a lot of big plays. I think Taylen Green is at or near the top of the league in runs of 10+ yards, which means he's moving the chains a lot. They've got some ability to stretch the field too, and so it's a multifaceted offense. And with Bobby Petrino kind of at the controls and calling the plays, it's going to be a tough matchup. But I think Tennessee's got to find ways to make negative plays and get some turnovers there, and they've got to sort of get that inconsistency out of Arkansas, because as we touched on at the beginning, that they've had stretches where they look almost unstoppable, but then they've had stretches where they really haven't moved the ball and haven't scored many points.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting subplots of this game too is, and I asked Trey Biddy about this in our Behind Enemy Lines Q&A that we do each week too. And I don't think he knows, so it was an unfair question probably in a lot of ways, but just how will Bobby Petrino approach things in this situation? Because I think he pretty clearly wants to keep the job, so he's going to do what he can to try to earn it. But each interim coach's approach is kind of different, and sometimes your approach is, hey, we're going to keep things simple so we can play fast, and especially going on the road to a place like Neyland Stadium, communication is so difficult. You don't necessarily want to throw in a bunch of changes. Even with the benefit of an open date, but at the same time, you've got the benefit of kind of the element of surprise with a revamped staff. So, how many new things do we see? How much new stuff can you feasibly put in mid-season? And then do you see them just kind of throw caution to the wind and go for it on anything that's under 4th and 5? Are they going to go for it on 6 4th downs in this game? Are they going to try a fake punt, trick plays? What onside kicks? How aggressive do they get, knowing that, let's face it, any one win like this, even if they lose a bunch of other games, could give Bobby Petrino a case to stick around as the full-time coach, because I don't think people are expecting Arkansas to win very many games down the stretch. So how Petrino approaches this is sort of an interesting discussion to me, and I'll be fascinated by what he does in this situation, because we know Bobby Petrino, he's got a pretty extensive track record, but we haven't seen Bobby Petrino kind of playing with house money in a situation like this with a team that he's not been coaching for a long time, and kind of having to make some changes midstream.
Shifting gears here, Ryan, we're going to take some questions. Just got a few from the GoVols247, the checkerboard, which now has a search function, by the way. I don't know if you saw that, Ryan.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
We've had, I don't want to say complaints, but a lot of posts over the years. Man, I wish this board had a search function. Well, guess what? We do now. We might just mess around next and come up with the 24/7 Sports app. You never know. We're crossing off one item at a time. I think it only goes back 13 months. So
I will say I'm a little worried by some of the threads that might get bumped. That could be interesting. Let's hope not.
Well, it only goes back, I think, 13 months at this point. So people going back to look up, what they said during this coaching search, or when Josh Heupel was hired, or when. I guess when Nico left would still be under that window, but some people want to go look up their first posts and even some stuff back from past coaching searches, because the lifespan of 24/7 covers several of them. I don't think you can go back and find those, and plus some of those are archived where you couldn't bump them, but still, that is a new addition. Maybe we're late on it. I don't know. I don't know what other boards have and don't have, but we're always trying to adapt and adjust and do new things that make the user experience nice. Ryan, do we have a promo running right now on that note? Seems like a good time to.
We don't, but it is a good time to join the site. You can get a full price monthly subscription, which obviously isn't a sale, but that's kind of an added perk, because it's a great time to be on Paramount Plus right now, and that gives you instant access to Paramount Plus with your GoVols 24/7 subscription. So you can sign up for full price monthly or 30% off an annual subscription to join right now. And obviously it's that fun time of year with not just football and recruiting going on, but basketball getting ready to start, and women's basketball as well, and then even some baseball coverage during the fall that we've had here and there. So lots going on, and definitely a great time to check out the site. But yeah, that Paramount Plus is a nice added perk. A lot of people enjoy getting along with their GoVols 24/7 subscription, and there's a bunch of some shows, and obviously the UFC is coming to that, and I think there's some Patrick, you know better on the soccer offerings there, but there's some soccer programming on that streaming service that's worth having, and I know my kids love it for all the Nickelodeon shows and stuff like that. We've used it a ton. So if you got a family, Paramount Plus is definitely a good streaming service to have, and a nice perk to being a GoVols 24/7 member. That basically pays for itself. If you're just wanting for Paramount Plus and get the added bonus of being on GoVols 24/7, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just don't join for us. We're not the. Are we the perk or are we the main attraction? We're probably the perk, I would say, not the main attraction. But yeah, we do have some questions here. Go 10 Vol for Life opened us up with a 3-part question. Asked if David Hobbs is a go this Saturday. We touched on that a lot at the beginning. Again, we'll see. Everything, him not being on the report seems to suggest that he is on track to play. So again, we'll see if there's any changes. Yeah. Just, there's always a chance. They added a couple guys before the Mississippi State game, but I don't think that's going to happen with Hobbs. Second question, Boo returning punts. That's something you talked about last week during the open date, Ryan, that Tennessee needs to figure out is, do they need to just let Boo go back there and be the guy, or do they need to continue to sort of mess around and give different guys different chances and see who can catch the ball?
Yeah, that's my guess is you just stick with Boo Carter there. I think 2 things on that. One, he is your best punt returner. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. So the only question is, can he be responsible with the ball, and can he field it cleanly? And as long as he can, there's no reason not to have him back there. The other thing is, I would worry about the impact on Braylon Staley if he has a problem again, because look at what happened last week. It seemed like that got in his head a little bit, having those early issues, and it took him till later in the game to kind of get back in the swing of things offensively, or at least that's the way it looked from a distance. So I would just want Braylon Staley to be able to focus on being the offensive playmaker that he is, and continuing to develop offensively, and not have to worry about the added pressure of that. Plus he's got the weight of having some missed opportunities back there. So I'm afraid if you put him back there, that might get in his head again about, oh gosh, can I field this one cleanly if you have one that's sort of kicked awkwardly or whatever. So yeah, I would have Boo Carter back there, but that is something I'm sort of interested in seeing this week, is how they approach that, and if Boo can sort of take that job and run with it. In addition to playing what I thought was his best game of the year defensively against Mississippi State, he's a weapon for them back there, and I would want him back there catching punts, but he has obviously had a couple issues there at times this season.
Yeah, I would put him back there too, just because if you put a new guy back there and he drops it, then you kind of look foolish. Whereas if you put your best guy back there, I mean, you could make the case that he's just as likely to muff it as he is to take it 30 yards or house one. Yeah. I mean, that's how that's sort of the nature of Boo Carter in general. Final question from Go 10 Vol for Life is, where would you set the spread for Arkansas? This is right up your alley, Gamble hand.
Set the spread. I think.
Yeah, where would you set the spread? It's a 12.5 right now, right, or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's either 12.5 or 13.5. I know it opened at 13.5. I mean, I think that number's about right. I think Vegas has this one, pretty nailed. As I thought about my score prediction a little bit today, I don't know exactly how this one's going to play out, obviously, but it feels like a game that could easily end up, if you look at the over/under, Vegas is basically projecting a 42-28 kind of game. And that feels about right with where these two teams are. With that being said, Arkansas has played a lot of closer games on the road. So given that and just the unpredictability of what Arkansas might throw at Tennessee, it could be even closer than that. So I think double digits is right. I'd probably go at least 12.5, maybe 13.5. That sounds about where I would put it.
First of 2 questions from Nick. One is a true or false. The Arkansas running backs comments about our defense will give Tim Banks' group a bit of extra motivation on Saturday. The comments in question from Mike Washington Jr., who we touched on earlier, quote, they have a great defense, but a lot of holes. It's going to be a lot of holes in their defense. It's going to be a fun game. Is he wrong? I don't think he's wrong. There are some holes in this Tennessee defense that we've seen so far this season. So is that going to be extra motivation? For Tennessee, I think all you need to do is look at last year as plenty of motivation for this game.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal, but hey, as a coach, you'll take anything like that you can get. These are the exact kinds of comments that coaches hate to hear from their own players, because you're like, oh, great, you just gave them something to get fired up around. So Yeah, if you're Arkansas, you're hoping Tennessee is overlooking you and looking ahead to Alabama next week. So anything that draws more of their attention to this game and makes them more fired up to stick this one up your tailpipe, you don't want that to happen. So yeah, you're trying to fly under the radar, and a comment like this gives them, maybe just a little bit of added fuel. It's not ideal, but yeah, to your point, I think the extra motivation for this game mostly comes from what happened last year for the players that were on this team then, and them remembering what that felt like to see Arkansas celebrating a big win like that when Tennessee had that game well within its reach for most of the game, and then even had a chance to win it at the end. Of course, we won't talk about that play, but yeah, that was a game that Tennessee, it stung for a while for Tennessee, and they're lucky that it didn't cost them a chance at the college football playoff, because it easily could have.
Second question from Nick one is a big picture question, postseason question. What do you think this football team will need position wise out of the portal, and how aggressive will the coaching staff be in pursuing those targets? He says it feels like we will need at least 9 to 10 portal additions this offseason. I would say it's going to depend on who leaves. That's obviously the big question, and we know that Tennessee is going to be, so we say, selective in the portal. They're going to prioritize keeping guys over splashing a bunch of money in the portal. And this is a pretty young roster too, so that also will go will factor into to what the approach they take into that part of the roster management for 2026.
Yeah, I think the total number and maybe the role players, the rotational players and things like that they pursue, that's going to depend on exactly who leaves, to your point. I think you can sort of foresee at least one or two big needs, and that's where I would start. I think they're going to need a starting safety, probably. You're losing Andre Turrentine. Idris Farouk is figuring it out, I think, as a young safety. I think they feel okay about him going forward. So he'll probably be one of your starters next year. But you need a second starter. You've got Caleb Beasley that looks like he's capable of being that, but he's not been probably as good as they hoped he would be to this point. And Sidney Walton is a young guy still figuring it out. So I don't know that you go into next year counting on one of those guys. So if I'm Tennessee, I'm going to the transfer portal for a safety, and I'm getting someone about as good as I can get. But the interesting part of that is that's not been a position where Tennessee has devoted significant resources in the past. Does that change? A Jacoby Thomas out of the transfer portal, that they've gotten some guys like that before, but they've typically not gone, or at least not gotten far with the biggest names at safety in the transfer portal. So I'll be interested in seeing what they can get, but I think you'll at least need an experienced guy at safety, someone who's at least another option capable of starting. And then on the defensive line, I think you're probably going to need someone at defensive tackle. You're losing, obviously you're losing Jackson Moy. It looks like after this year, even though he missed a few games, he's on track to play the rest of the way. So he should be gone after this year. And then Bryson Easton leaving as a 6-year senior. So just those two alone, and that's not even including the outside possibility that someone else could bounce in the portal or whatever. You've got some young talent there, Ethan Utley, Isaiah Campbell, guys like that who played a lot. You got Jamal Wallace and Nathan Robinson, some guys like that, but you probably want someone who's capable of playing a pretty big role at defensive tackle. So I would start there. The rest will come down to just, do they get a running back in the 26th class? If they don't, you might need someone there. Do they get a tight end in the 26th class? If you don't, you might need a rotational guy or something there. So it's going to be, a guy here, a guy there to the point of the question being asked, but it's I'll address this one, though. I see a lot.
You got to go quarterback, right?
Yeah. People on the checkerboard already asking, is Tennessee going to go get a starting quarterback? I don't see it. I know everyone's kind of excited about, hey, this has worked out well with Joey Aguilar, and it didn't work out so well with Nico. So let's kind of change midstream and just go back to the transfer portal and not rely on a freshman or a redshirt freshman at quarterback next year. If you're projecting that George McIntyre and Faison Brandon are the main contenders for that job, even if Jake Merklinger leaves, I just think that's a tough sell. You can go out and sell an opportunity to compete, but how many guys on the outside looking in are going to look at that situation and say, 5-star quarterback who's ranked the number 1 player in his class, highly ranked quarterback from the previous class who got a little bit of experience as a true freshman. Yeah, I feel good about my chances of winning that job. It would take a really experienced guy coming in that, with a decent payday probably, to come in and think he's going to start over those two guys. So, I mean, I get where it's coming from. I just knowing the types of resources Tennessee has already invested in that position, I just think you gotta play the young guys. One of them's going to win that job and run with it probably, or take that job and run with it, and it's going to be a really talented guy who might be a starter for 3 years. So I think Tennessee's going to, they're going to look for a depth guy if Jake Merklinger leaves. I don't know that they'll be able to find one, but I don't see Tennessee going to get a starting quarterback in the transfer portal. Maybe there's a scenario where the JUCO eligibility thing opens up the door for Aguilar to return, but outside of that, I don't see anyone besides those young guys starting next year.
I would throw wide receiver as a position. I can't see them forcing a guy in there because you're going to have Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley back. You've still got Travis Smith Jr., Joakim Dotson, and Radarius Jackson. Then you've got this class coming in led by Tristan Keys. So that's not a position where you're going to need to make a big splash at a position that could get pretty pricey in the portal. Now, if some of those guys don't see playing, maybe some of those freshmen this year don't see a path to playing time next season, maybe you've got to backfill those spots if you're not able to keep those guys. But that's all down the road. There's still 7 games left, and there's just one portal window this season, so that'll be something new. Old School Vol has a basketball question. What position will Eton Borg start out playing, and do you see him getting significant minutes during the pre-SEC part of the schedule? I'm not the basketball guy, but if you bring in a 22-year-old with a lot of international experience, I would be playing him, even though he was sort of the late addition to the roster.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you have anything to add on basketball?
Ben's take when we did that podcast around the time of his commitment was that's the guy that's expected to play early at least. We'll see if he's a starter. I don't know that he starts on this team, but it seems like a guy that will have a chance to get significant minutes. If I remember right, I think he's probably more of a 2 guard.
I think it sounds right.
I believe that's the case. But they've got some, as usual, some kind of position flexible guys. It's become almost a positionless sport in recent years. So yes, he's a 6'3" guard. He may be a bit of a combo guard if I'm not mistaken. I may be mixing him up, but I think that's a guy that will probably play off the ball, but maybe have a chance to play some point guard too. So either way, you definitely got another option for the backcourt there, and a guy that should play at least some minutes, you would think, right away.
Final question is from CCT Vol. What do you think is Tennessee's biggest strength in the game this weekend? I will say, A, being at home. Georgia aside, they've been very good at home at Neyland Stadium under Josh Heupel. And B, the offense. That's going to have to, like we all said going into the season, right, Ryan? We all thought this would be a defense first team. No, it's an offense first team. And Joey Aguilar and his receivers are going to have to continue to sort of carry the mail and be the tip of the spear, as Tennessee coaches and players have said. They like to use that line. So the offense has got to lead the way, and you've got to like this matchup against an Arkansas defense that has struggled to stop anyone. I mean, you listen to Trey Biddy this week. He's talking about just effort, and Bobby Petrino was talking about getting guys in the right stance. It's like, okay, they're going back to the basics there, so they're probably not going to overhaul their defense. But when you got a defense talking about that would be the kind of defense I would love to play if I'm Tennessee's offense.
Yeah, I would go more specific. Maybe I'd say the passing game is Tennessee's greatest strength until further notice. I mean, they came out throwing the ball against Mississippi State, and they've not run it particularly great against either SEC team they've played. They've been okay, but I think they've got a little bit to prove. And seeing those numbers against Ole Miss, I was a little surprised by that. I'd heard, hey, Arkansas got the worst run defense in the league, but Ole Miss didn't run it very well. That's usually a team that kind of mirrors Tennessee a little bit offensively in most cases. So I know they don't have maybe just a world beater back there, but that's at least.
They also threw for over 300 yards.
So I think Tennessee's offense is kind of going to be led by the passing game until further notice, and that's what other teams are going to be most scared of is those guys beating them down the field. And how the heck do we defend a 50-50 ball to Chris Brazzell at this point with the way he's playing?
Yeah, I didn't even mention him talking about the receivers in the portal because he's playing his way into the NFL.
Oh, he's gone.
Yeah, enjoy it. No. Enjoy him for the next 7 or however many games you get out of him, Tennessee. Again, we all saw coming too, right?
One dark horse thing in the portal may be a tackle, but I don't think you should need a tackle because
depends on how you feel about Bennett Warren. Yeah,
I was gonna say you got Bennett Warren, Jeremiah's Hurd. You got some developmental guys there that you would hope would be ready. But if Lance Hurd goes pro, you could maybe see Tennessee dabble in the tackle market. You would hope you don't have to since you got a couple guys in the pipeline there.
That's another position that can get pretty expensive in the portal.
Yeah.
So our podcast is not expensive. It is free to all of you to listen to, and we appreciate those of you that do, whether you're checking us out for the first time or you are a regular. Whatever category you fit into, give us a rating and a review. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you get them. We will have more coverage throughout the rest of the week on the site We have our staff picks, our bold predictions. Ryan will have a recruiting preview. It is a home game, so Tennessee will have a handful of recruits, at least one official visitor. So check that out. Ryan will have the full rundown on Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've wrapped up our preview stuff. I've got both portions of the matchups posted, looking at all the ins and outs of this game, and so we will have you plenty occupied here from now this Thursday afternoon until Saturday afternoon when the game kicks off at 4:15 on the SEC Network. For Ryan Callahan, I'm Patrick Brown. We'll talk to you guys after the game on Saturday night.